Now we're going to start doing some actual carving. I'm going to show you how I started out using a simple pocket knife and a blank piece of wood. This was my very first carving knife. I'm going to hold the piece of wood in my left hand, and I'm going to place my fingers away from where my cutting is going to occur. The grain is going vertical with this wood, so up in the top of the block you'll see the end grain. I'm going to start on a corner and create a small, simple face. I'm going to start rounding off what's going to be his hood. And he's going to have a robe, and he's going to be a bearded, mustached figure. I have two pencil marks here that I had placed in. This is going to be the top of the hood, and this will be about where I want the nose to be. I'm going to sketch in a few marks that will give me an idea where I'm going to place the eyes, a fairly thick, bushy mustache, and a beard. So these are some reference points that I'm going to use as I start to block out this face. Now I'm holding the knife in my right hand, supporting the blade with my thumb, and also using my left thumb to guide and help push the knife through the wood. Now this is what's called a V cut. We're going to take and slice the knife through the wood and then come from the top and meet that cut so we get a little notch. So the notch has created the top of the nose and also about where the bridge of the nose is going into a forehead. We're just going to continue to make a few notches to get a little more depth. And one thing I would really like you to try to practice as you're starting to make knife cuts is to use the length of the blade. This is a slicing cut, and what I would want you to do is to be able to draw the knife through the wood as opposed to just pushing it straight through the wood. And I'm making a shallow chip. I'm not trying to hog out a lot of wood at one time. Now, as we start to create different shapes, you're going to find that the grain is going to be very cooperative and carve easy in one direction. It's not going to carve that easy going into the grain. If you think of grain as shingles on a roof, this is the top of my roof and I'm going down, and the knife cuts wonderfully in that direction. Going from the bottom up, it wants to catch and undermine and crack. Now the grain in each piece of wood is going to be slightly different, and you'll just have to start to develop a feel for it, and you'll be able to start to read the grain. And the best way to read the grain is actually how the knife is slicing through it. Now I won't go in this direction because I'm going into the grain, but from this point I'm going back downhill, and now the grain is, I'm cutting with the grain. If I come from underneath that little rise, that little curvature, watch what's going to happen. It's just going to pop out. And I'm going back against the grain, so now I have to come to the top of the hill and start working down. And go from the top of the hill, start working down. You'll start to feel this as you're progressing through this exercise. Now I've showed you the slicing cut, and I've showed you the V cut. Okay, where one cut meets another, and you create a triangular wood chip. Now a stop cut is another form of a knife cut using the tip of the blade to create a line, a definitive edge. It's used to define an area where you don't want a subtle change of forms. You want an outline. So this stop cut is basically a cut that's going straight into the wood, and then I'm going to use the tip of the knife to come up and meet that cut. So you see there's a difference in the structure and the ridge that I just created by putting in a stop cut. So we have the slicing cut, we have a V cut, and now you've seen a stop cut. So we made 3 different types of cuts so far. Now I'm going to do both sides. I want to come around and outline both sides of my face. And this is what I would refer to as just a simple face. It's really just going to consist of 2 eyes, 2 cheeks, and a nose, and the mustache and beard will cover a lot of the mouth, chin, and throat and cheek transitions. So this is just giving you a basic idea of how to create simple structures, simple shapes to create your first face. Now these little stop cuts are giving me the parameters for a nose. A little hollow by making another V cut, by coming down into where the eye will be. Now I'm going to use a slicing cut, reverse slice, forward. It's almost a sawing action with each cut creating a small wood chip. Again, think in terms of just thin slices. Now, as I'm working on this piece, I'm sort of have myself in a nice, comfortable position. I'm relaxed. I'm just leaning back in my chair. Rest one elbow on the arm of my chair. Just helps steady the piece of wood. I started this piece on a corner for obvious reasons that if you look at a person's face, it's a triangular shape. The nose being out at the point of the triangle and then flaring out to the cheeks. So that's why we start on a corner. It just gives you a nice start for the basic shape that you were going to try to get anyway. If you feel yourself pushing the knife too hard, either your knife is dull or you're trying to create too big of a chip. So back off and take a smaller bite with the knife. I'm going to use the case pocket whittler. Now, I'm holding the knife now as like a pencil, using my little finger as a rest, and in using my left thumb as also sort of a pushing motion, because I want this cut to be very controlled. It's a tight radius, and this is giving a little shape to the bridge of the nose and where I want the eyes to be. Now also one thing you want to be careful about when using a pocket knife is they're not a fixed blade. Okay, in other words, this does not lock in position. So if you're making a stop cut, you don't want the knife to fold back in on your finger. So I'm using my thumb as a pivot and I'm just letting the blade roll across the tip of my thumb, and it just gives me a really nice, steady, controlled cut. Now I'm going to use the tip of the blade and I'm going to make sort of a crescent moon stop cut. I'm going to follow it with the tip of the blade and create what's going to be the eye. So I did the right side, I'm going to do the left side. And just pushing with my thumb and steering with my right hand. And with any luck, that chip will come right out. And we're starting to see where the eyes are going to be placed. Now I want to make a little transition from the bridge of the nose, and I'm just going to use the tip of the blade and I'm going to slide it to make a semicircular hollow, because I want this guy to be smiling. I want him to be happy. So I like to accentuate features. I don't particularly exaggerate the features, but I like to accentuate. And by accentuate, I mean by having a nice, broad, wide nose as opposed to a tiny, nondescript kind of a shape. I like to have my forms, and all of these are forms. The forehead has a form, the eyes are a form, the cheeks have form. The eyes are a rounded shape. They're not a Egyptian elliptical kind of form. And then I come in from the center of the eye, basically, and remove that chip so that the eyes are rounded from inside corner to outside corner and top to bottom. And I'll make a little pencil mark just so you can kind of see this a little easier. From this pencil line, I start to round from the center. I go from the top of the line into the forehead, and then to round the bottom, I go from the pencil line and go downhill. Because if I start below that line and round, I'm going to keep having a flat form instead of a rounded form. So I'm going to make a little hollow. I'll put a pencil line right here. I'm using a very short slice with the very tip of the blade. I'm using that very narrow blade to create the flare of the nostrils. I'll take the tip of the blade and I'm just going to make a semicircular cut, and this is a stop cut, again using the tip of the blade to make a straight in cut, and then I'm going to use the tip of the blade and come from the top and remove a small wood chip, and this is going to give me the back cut for my nostril, and that deep cut creates a shadow. The shadow gives depth. The shadow helps to enunciate the shape. Okay, I'm going to round off those mustache. Let's see, let's give him a mustache that's going to droop down somewhat. And these are two stop cuts. Okay, now I'll come back and what I call pick up the chip is to use the tip of the blade to just make contact with the stop cut. I don't want the tip of the blade to go past that stop cut. I just want it to come right up and just kind of kiss that cut so that the chip comes out nice and clean, but there's not an over stabbing of the tip of the blade going into the mustache area. And we just talked about shadows. Here's another great place for one. Now you see how much more defined that shape is because of the outline of the shadow. And this gives the illusion that there's a mouth, okay, without really carving a mouth. Like I said, this is a simple face, so I'm not going to get into all kinds of real heavy detail with it. Sometimes just the suggestion of a mouth is all you need. Now I want to remove some of this stock here. I'll take the bigger blade on this. This really gives a slice. This is almost like using a hand plane when you have a blade this long. So what I'm doing is I want to remove some of this wood somewhat quickly. So I'm leaving my thumb on the back of the blade, and I'm only going as far as my thumb will allow me. And if you want to look at knife carving as whittling, this is kind of whittling. This is just haphazardly removing wood with a knife. And then this is carving when you're making conscious cuts to create specific forms and shapes. So that's not whittling. But again, using the slice. So you come down and you come back up, and you can come down and come back up and make a sawing motion, but that's still incorporating the slice. And that slicing motion is something that you should practice and try to master, because it comes in handy when you're using chisels and other carving tools. All those blades are designed to slice, not just be forced through a piece of wood. This is outlining the beard again on the right side, kind of like what I was doing on the left side. Outline the fist. And you hear that bump. What the stop cut does is it separates the wood fibers. So now there's a void here. There's no wood fibers where I just cut them apart. So the knife is having resistance as it goes through the wood, and all of a sudden it finds that void and it hits the far wall. That means you hit the stop cut and you don't have to go any farther with your slice. I want to grab my detail knife and I'm going to follow the pencil line, and I'm just going to give a little curve right at the end, and this little smiley crow's foot kind of thing. And I'm going to go about the width of the knife blade itself and create another wood chip that'll create a shadow and make his eye look closed. Oh, we'll give him a little tuft of hair, and I want to curve. This lowers the forehead also a little bit. And these are some cleanup cuts. I'll look at the surfaces of the cuts that I had previously made. There might be some that are a little ratty and need of a little cleanup. Finish up this fist. Okay, we'll do a back cut where his elbow is. Bring it down to about where the hand is coming out of the cuff of his robe. I'll make another hollow, or a stop cut here to create the hollow inside his robe where his hand is coming out and create a shadow. You hear that knife hit the stop cut? That bump. That means you're there, so your chip should come right out. Carving is quite a quiet pastime, but there are noises that I look for, and there's noises that I don't want to hear. So when my knife is going through the wood, I don't want to hear very much. If I hear a tearing and a scratching and scritching noise, that means my blade is dull and it's crushing the fibers rather than slicing them. So I listen for that. And I listen for the bump that I hit the stop cut with. And I listen to how the fibers are sounding. See, the wood talks to you somewhat. Down on the bottom, I'm just going to we're going to practice our V cut again, our two-sided cut. And what I'm going to create is just the toe of a slipper or boot or whatever hobbit wizard Santa Claus would wear. By showing just the tip of the foot, this is the beginning of showing motion in a carving. Both feet would give it a stagnant standing look. By just having one foot forward, it gives a slight illusion that the carving was actually in motion walking. What I want to do is take the tip of the blade and create a flowing line. Nice, deep, definitive stop cut. The chip came out all as basically one chip. I like curving lines. So every line I put in is going to have a slight curve, and that gives it more of an organic look rather than having everything straight and angular and formal. I'm going to give a few deep wrinkle cuts to show a looseness of the robe. I need some sort of a hood, so what I want to do is kind of create a drooping point. So I'm going to take a little bit off the back. Okay, this is a fold that I'm creating just to give me the floppiness of the back of the hood. And even though you're not going to see the back of the carving very much, I still want to make sure that there aren't any bandsaw marks left on the block of wood. And we still have to make two very important cuts, and those are the inside of the nostrils. I'm going to take the tip of the blade, and halfway from the tip of the nose to the back of the nostril, I'm going to make a semicircular stop cut. This is going to give me the opening for the nostril. And I'm just going to use the tip of the blade like I was paring an apple core. And I'm just going to remove the chip. Deep shadow, accented by the shadow, and it gives me the opening for the nostril. Okay, this is just about finished. You could leave it this way, or if you'd like to add another dimension, I'll introduce the use of a gouge. This is a number 11 gouge. I'm going to create a few little flowing lines to simulate some mustache hair and beard hair. Now, I'm not going to go and make horizontal cuts or vertical cuts. I want to follow the contour. I want to keep the rhythm of the lines and echo them by just making a couple passes on each side. And I'm using that slicing motion also. I'm letting the chisel slice through the wood as opposed to just pushing it through. And this is creating just some texture to give the illusion there's a flowing beard. Now we have our finished wizard. You've been shown the 3 or 4 basic knife cuts, slicing motion, tool handling, and an understanding of grain. These concepts and techniques are going to be called upon as we introduce more carving tools and carving projects.